we're going to start with Reed. So, Reed, starting with number 5, give us your top 5.
All right, starting with number 5. I was born in 1987, so my formative years growing up watching a lot of 90s Vols baseball, right? And R.A. Dickey is number 5 on my list for me. If you remember R.A. Dickey, shutdown pitcher. Tennessee won 3 SEC championships during his tenure here, largely because he was that kind of ace that you needed, especially back then in a different era of baseball when you had guys that went deeper into games, not as analytics driven. You're not matching up so much. He was the most dominant pitcher I remember seeing at Tennessee. Ended up having a really great MLB career, got hurt, learned to throw the knuckleball, extended his career. But even just looking at his Tennessee career, 3 SEC championships, unbelievable shutdown pitcher. They got the College World Series. So that's number 5 for me, the best pitcher that I saw with my 2 eyes at Tennessee in my time. Number 4 was a guy that you all know from the football field probably, and I am too young to have seen him play at Tennessee. But one of the best athletes ever in the SEC. One of, I think, 3 people that have their jersey retired for the Vol baseball program. Condredge Holloway is number 4 for me. They didn't play as many games. If you look at stats, if you're a stat hunter and things like that, his numbers aren't going to jump off the page like everyone else because it's a totally different era. It's not like the majors where you've always played about the same amount of games and gotten the same number of at-bats and stuff. But Condredge is up there for me. Number 3, and it's hard doing the top 5, but it's especially hard doing the top 3. Number 3 for me is Chris Burke, not Blake Burke, as somebody got confused on Twitter. Chris Burke. No offense to Blake Burke. Chris Burke, the best hitter that I had seen kind of in that 2000s era for Tennessee Vol baseball. Again, had a first-round draft pick, led him to it was an All-American, first-team All-American in 2001, hit 401, I think, his sophomore year, which is just ridiculous. He's been kind of the prototype, I guess, for like college baseball player who went on to have a solid MLB career, but he carried those teams were not very good there in kind of the turn of the millennium. And he finished his career as the all-time leader in at-bats, hits, runs scored, singles, doubles, triples, and bases. And that's number 3 on my list. So going on up to number 2 is a guy that we all know and love, Christian Moore. I had him at 3 before the College World Series. And I had to bump him up because he brought home a title. And he was absolutely clutch in doing it. Second player to hit for the cycle in the College World Series. Chris Burke was the first Vol to hit for the cycle, by the way. Christian Moore, the second player to hit for it in the College World Series, leading off that championship game with a homer when he didn't look great over the weekend. God, there's just so much to like about that guy. I thought they obviously pitched around him a lot. They were a little bit scared of him. Maybe he pressed a little bit, but what a College World Series for that young man as well. What a season for that young man.
Absolutely.
That was one of the most. That was Jalen Hyatt, Dalton Connect, like Peyton, Joey Kent, Jamal Lewis. Throughout Allen Houston, like that was that level of season for me, watching him play ball this year. And so I had him at 2, even though he doesn't have the kind of career cumulative stats that Chris Burke had, because he won a title. He won a title, and he was the best hitter on the team.
The only national champion on that list.
That's right. And then number 1, he's the Todd Helton. If you're not going Todd Helton here, you probably didn't watch him play. It's that. So I was like first grade ish, I think, when he played at Tennessee. And I went over there a bunch. You could get tickets really cheap on the first base side, especially for a Tuesday game or a Friday game, and watched Todd play a bunch. And my whole family grew up in Fountain City. All went to Central High School, which is where Todd went. So we all sort of followed him his whole career. And what a privilege it was, because that's the best hitter I've ever seen. And if you look at his stats at Tennessee, and then what that carried on to the majors, he was one of the best hitters in Major League Baseball history. Flirted with 400 there. I remember checking the paper back in the day, the newspaper for young folks. That's right, because it's the only way you could get a box score, and we would check it basically just to see how many hits Todd had last night and what his average was for the season, because we were watching his chase to 400. And he was flirting with it up through like July, So, yeah, awesome to see him get inducted into the Hall of Fame this year. His numbers retired for Tennessee. He's in the college baseball and the Major League Baseball Hall of Fame. He led them to the College World Series in, I believe, 1995. But also was an incredible closer. So not only did he play first base, but he was a shutdown pitcher, a shutdown closer for Tennessee, and a quarterback on the football team. But I think he was the best batter in that lineup, and he was also a darn good pitcher. And so I think he had to be number one for me. And guys, I was obviously sad when he retired, but it's super cool to see him at the parade on Tuesday, celebrating the championship and supporting that program that really he did help put on the map there in the 90s, and carried on the name for Vol baseball for a very long and historic Hall of Fame MLB career. So number one for me, Todd Helton, my favorite Vol. A lot of nostalgia there, but man, Christian Moore gave him a run for his money on my list.
Totally understand that. Well, Rustin, who are your top 5 Vol baseball players?
I went a completely different.
That's a solid list Reed just gave there.
I went a completely different direction.
I like this.
We
did not confer on this beforehand, guys.
No. So my view of what makes someone a great player is how far they get toward the pinnacle. And the pinnacle is not playing at Tennessee. The pinnacle is Major League Baseball. So number 5 for me was Christian Moore. And the only reason is really 2 things. He's only the 3rd player ever to hit for the Triple Crown in the SEC. And I think he projects to be an insanely talented professional. I think he's going to be in Major League Baseball for a very, very long time.
I know he's got the work ethic for it.
Yeah.
I want him on my team, right?
Yeah.
If you're a Major League Baseball fan, you want him on your team.
Yep. Number 4 is R.A. Dickey. Again, this is where I transition into pro baseball. R.A. Dickey was in the pros for 15 years, had a very successful career, reinvented himself, became the knuckleballer into his career, and just really found ways to stick in Major League Baseball and be a productive member of his organization. Number 3 is one that I bet neither of you are going to say, and that was Phil Garner. Phil played pro baseball for 16 years, mostly with the Brewers. Fun fact about Phil, he had lifetime 225 stolen bases, the most stolen bases ever by a Vol in professional baseball. Number 2 is Rick Honeycutt.
Okay.
Rick Honeycutt, this just still boggles my mind. Rick Honeycutt was in professional baseball for 21 years. Not playing and coaching, just playing. Okay? I don't know I'll bet if you've made a list of how many players lasted over 20 years in pro baseball, you may not need all your fingers. I mean, that's just obscene.
Going back to 4th of July, like Reed was talking about earlier.
Yeah.
You only need like 9.
Right. For any human being to spend 21 years in professional baseball is just unbelievable. And then after that, to be an extremely qualified and successful pitching coach, then head coach. The man is a major league lifer and a huge representative of the University of Tennessee. Number one, this was an easy one. It's got to be Todd Helton, because there is only one person in the history of the University of Tennessee to be inducted into the Major League Baseball Hall of Fame. It happens in 3 weeks, and it's Mr. Todd Helton. He will be the only Vol in Major League Baseball Hall of Fame. Just a honorable mention, just for fun. Who has the most pitching wins ever in professional baseball history? What former Vol?
Oh.
You got me.
You're not going to get it. His name is Tommy Bridges. He was in the pros for 16 years, all 16 years playing professional baseball for the Tigers, not in the minors, 16 years in pro baseball in the 1930s and 40s. All 16 years with the Tigers, he won 194 games.
Wow.
To put that in perspective, Rick Honeycutt in 21 years won 109 games. So Tommy Bridges was pretty stinking dominant. Former Vol from Gordonsville, Tennessee.
That's a deep cut.
I like Rustin going historian on me over here. I'm liking this. We need a Rustin reads us history segment. I will subscribe to that.
Get like a little theme music intro for it, and now it's time.
We just need 5 minutes of Rustin reads us history.
Yep. Hey, I just gave you all like 4 trivia questions that you can use for the rest of this week.
There you go.
Forever, actually.
Yeah.
So my top 5 is actually strikingly similar to Reed's, except for one, and that's because when Rustin sent me his to put on here, I was like, "Oh, that's actually a really good choice." So I stole one of his. But
brothers.
Yeah, exactly. But other than that, it was really similar. Other than that, it was very similar to Reed's. Number 5 for me is R.A. Dickey as well. And what okay, so I think this is important that we got to, how do you rank this? That's the real crux of this. Like, we've already seen Reed take one approach, which I took a very similar approach to Reed. You see Rustin take another approach, and both of them are really good approaches. I think there's 2 things that impact how you rank the best Vol baseball players of all time. And honestly, a big one that is now going to impact these rankings forever is the transfer portal. What if somebody transfers in and they're only here for 1 year? That's it. And like Billy Amick or somebody like that. I mean, obviously he's not going to be on this list. But let's say
in basketball. Yeah, right.
Hey, thank you. Yes.
Right.
Perfect example. And so the transfer portal really impacts this, because all of a sudden it can't just be what they did as a Vol only. That can't be the only criteria, because that sample size could be very, very small. So now we got to consider what they did before they were here and what they do after they're here. And I think, all of us, spoiler alert, my number 1's Todd Helton too. I mean, because like Rustin said, there's only one dude that has made it to the Major League Hall of Fame. Like, there's just one. And so that has to count for something, right? I mean, like that has to matter. One of only 2 guys from the SEC ever to get to the Hall of Fame, which is mind-boggling. And he's currently sitting right over my left shoulder, right there in that little picture frame. Over there's the Football Time in Tennessee magazine from a couple years ago. We'll talk about that in a minute too. But so, how you rank this, it has to be somewhat of a combination of what they did as a Vol, but also what they did when they were not a Vol, whether that was prior to coming here or after they left, and what they did in the Major League. So all of that combined, this is the list I came up with. R.A. Dickey at number 5 because, like Reed mentioned, like Rustin mentioned, 1995 College World Series and SEC champions. He was the ace on that staff. 15-year career. I love how Rustin and Reed both mentioned how he adapted his game as a pro to make himself more of an asset for longer. I mean, got to give him some props. Number 4, this is the one I stole from Rustin, was Phil Garner. And I mean, all-century team at Tennessee, named to the all-century team. He was the 1969 home run champion in the country, led the country in home runs that year. 2-time all-SEC performer, All-American in 1970, 18-year Major League career, 3-time All-Star, and was a manager in Major League Baseball as well. So solid number 4 there. Number 3, Chris Burke. I agree with Reed on that one. Tennessee Athletics Hall of Fame member right there.
Yes.
First, now this is another big deal. His junior season, he was first team All-American and National Player of the Year finalist. There's only one other dude on this list that can say that. And so like that's a big deal. National Player of the Year finalist, 10th overall draft pick coming out of Tennessee, and all the other things that Reed mentioned as well. Number 2 for me was also Christian Moore, because statistically speaking, we just witnessed a Dalton Knecht-esque type season from him. I mean, the guy, he leads the SEC in the Triple Crown. He sets the single season home run record for the university and the career home run record for the university in the same season. First team All-American by D1 Baseball. They actually made up for everybody else's mistake of not including him. Somehow he's not a finalist for National Player of the Year. Somehow, I don't know how, but somehow he wasn't. But notice he has a distinction that no one else has on this list: national champion. He was the best player on the best team in the history of Tennessee baseball. That's got to mean something. And so he brought home the title. And then number 1, it has to be Todd Helton. It has to be. Like we said, there's only one thing. Actually, there are 2 things you could say. Actually, there are 3 things you could say that would all you have to say to allow this guy to be number 1 on the list. One of them is Major League Baseball Hall of Fame. The only guy on the list to have that distinction. That's good enough in and of itself. Another one is 1995 National Player of the Year.
Pretty good.
That's pretty good. Yeah. Only guy on the list to have that distinction. And so you could just say that, and that would be enough. The other thing is 3-time All-American. You could just say that, and that would be enough. And so, I mean, like there's no denying he's got the crown as numero uno in Vol baseball history. And I loved this question, and it was so difficult trying to come up with people, because obviously there's recency bias. Like for example, right now, if you're talking about Major League Baseball, Garrett Crochet is tearing it up in Major League Baseball right now. He's arguably one of the most dominant pitchers in the game right now. How do you not include him? But when you think about as a Vol and career as a whole, Conrich Holloway was probably my number 6 on that. So I mean, like, he was just outside. Blake Burke. I mean, I know it's recent, but I mean, he was the home run champion for the university for a brief minute. I mean, like, the guy had a tremendous first team All-American, tremendous career.
one of the things I loved about Todd's junior year, when you're talking about all these crazy stats, he led the SEC in home runs and ERA, which is nuts.
That is nuts. Who does that?
Yeah. Home run leader, ERA leader, Todd Helton. Also led the SEC in RBIs, runs, doubles, hits, walks, slugging percentage, and on base percentage. But 1.66 ERA and hit 20 dingers. So ridiculous. Fortunate, guys. We're fortunate to have seen some great baseball players come through here. And really, you're saying recency bias, but the reality is the ball baseball program is as good as it's ever been, obviously. They just brought home their first national championship. Went to College World Series 3 out of 4 years. So you can say recency bias, and I hear that, but the reality is these are some of the best players that have ever played here.
Yeah.
Period.
That's a great point. And, I think it's important to note as well, because I just thought about this here as we were doing this. All three of us had R.A. Dickey and Todd Helton on our top 5. And both of those guys played on that 1995 College World Series team.
Yep.
So that was a special group.
Yeah, they came in third that year. So third place finish.
Even that team that had two of the, according to all three of us, two of the top 5 players in the history of the game, even they couldn't bring home that national championship. So that just speaks even more to what this team was able to accomplish this year. It's incredible. To win a national title is so difficult.
Well, and aside from the recency biases of all the guys we've just mentioned, listen to all the ones we didn't mention. Jan Gomes, Mike DeFelice, Chase Headley, Joe Randa, Rich DeLucia, Luke Hochaver, Augie Ojeda, Greg McMichael, Zach Godley, Bubba Trammell, Nick Senzel, JP Arencibia, Julio Bourbon. It's
absolutely,
it is crazy the amount of talent that went through pro baseball that came through the University of Tennessee.
Absolutely.
Bubba Trammell was one of those that was another kind of that era we're talking about. I've loved following his pro career, long career, played with the Rays for a long time, had a bunch of his baseball cards and stuff. It's fun following Tennessee baseball players. And that's where, if you're a Vol fan now, like I was saying earlier, you're getting into the golden age of you're going to have a lot of guys to follow coming up.
Yep.
It's going to be a blast.
Absolutely.